Are you or your child planning on college or another form of higher education? Are you going to borrow money to pay for it? Stay tuned. We'll talk about student loans and what you need to know right now on the LawWorks.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Closed captioning for the LawWorks is made possible by a grant from the Monongalia County Bar Association to support legal information and education for all West Virginians. The LawWorks is made possible by major grants from the Office of the West Virginia Attorney General and from Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975 which provides high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems, as well as PC-based systems, and by a grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia.
Too often students mortgage their future before they even get started, and parents jeopardize their retirement so their children can get a decent education. My guest is Senior Assistant West Virginia Attorney General Chris Hedges. Chris, welcome back. It's been a while.
Thanks.
Student loans, they're a great idea. Thousands and thousands of people have gotten a good education using student loans. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, a number of things can go wrong. One of the things that people need to watch out for are scams related to the student debt industry, the financial aid industry. That's one of the reasons why we've put out a website, projectstudentaid.com, talks about these things and leads students to student aid packages that are best for them. But even before you get to the section on apply for aid, we give them warnings about these scams. Also, perhaps more importantly, and what is more common as a problem for students, is they take out too much debt. And once they get out of college, they've taken out so much that it's difficult to pay back.
Well, tell me about the scams. What kind of scams are in circulation?
Well, the first thing that anybody needs to know about scams and remember about scams is that they're going to they're always going to revolve around areas of the financial marketplace that have lots of money, and lots of money being spent and borrowed and used by ordinary people. So when you're talking about the student aid market, these are students that are just coming out of high school oftentimes. They really want that college education. Parents really want them to have that college education. Our society boosts the idea of a college education. So often students will trust any source of information that's promising them a lot of student aid. So there are scams out there which prey on students and parents, offering information packages, offering tutoring and suggestion and education on how to get the best student aid package, where the truth of it is you can get a lot of that information for free. You can generally get all of that information for free and you don't have to pay for it. Every now and then there are some good services in your community that you can hear about from other parents that are a good idea, but by and large you want to avoid services that sound like they're not local, they're not tailored to your needs, and they're just offering you a pie in the sky.
And actually that kind of scam is common in almost every area of life. They'll package up free information and then give it to you, and about all you really save is the effort of going to your web browser and typing in the information that you're looking for, because it is there. You mentioned a website that you've set up at the Attorney General's office. It's projectstudentaid.com. It's all one word, projectstudentaid.com. And I've looked at it, and it is a terrific source of information. We'll talk some more about that as we go through the program. Where I guess a student should, if you're in high school, should start with a guidance counselor in your school.
Absolutely.
That's where the freest, easiest information comes from.
That's right. That's right. And it's one-on-one, and that's one of the things we do stress in our website. One very good source of free information is right there, available to you every day in the guidance counselor office at your high school. There are lots of free services, not only on the student aid website made available by the U.S. Department of Education, but there are toll-free numbers made available by the U.S. Department of Education. There are TRIO counselors if someone is a veteran or service member as well. They can. There are lots of different programs where they can talk directly with other members of the service, get lots of information for not only free aid but also very beneficial loan packages for veterans and service members.
Well, the web page that the Attorney General's office has set up, who is that directed to? Is that directed to high school students or the population generally?
It's directed to everyone, and what we've tried to do is take a haystack of information and boil it down into a toolbox. And it's basically a roadmap. It's set up as a roadmap that has 5 stops geared to help students and parents of any age, and or their parents, to follow that roadmap and get the best student aid package available. In addition to the 5 stops on the roadmap that I'm talking about, there are 2 separate sections, one for veterans and service members like I was discussing, and in addition one for non-traditional students. As it happens, it's strange that they're now called non-traditional students, because whereas it used to be the majority of students were the population of students coming out of college and going straight, coming out of high school and going straight into college, now that is actually the minority of students. There's the non-traditional students, in other words, the older student, somewhat even a couple of years older than high school, they are now the majority entering higher education.
So non-traditional is the new traditional.
That's right.
Well, where a student in high school or anyplace else, they're thinking, I want to continue my education after I finish high school. Mm-hmm. What's the first step?
In my mind, you visit all resources necessary, you talk to your guidance counselor, but you go to our website. If you start at our website, it leads you to everywhere you're going to need to go to finance that education. Now, in terms of finding the college itself, there are lots of resources out there in terms of the quality of the degree and what kinds of academic programs you want to seek out. But on the financial aspect, start at our website, projectstudentaid.com. It's called Know Before You Owe for a reason. You go in there, it starts out with a checklist, a very valuable glossary of terms that everybody is going to need to know before they get in. If you want to skip that, fine. Regardless of what you do, go to the next stop on that roadmap. Follow the tips and warnings as necessary for everybody that is going to take out student loans and student aid. Necessary for everybody to read up those tips and warnings, make sure they're not a victim of a scam, make sure that they're following the best advice possible before they apply for aid, before they accept aid. The third stop on that roadmap, even more importantly, is the apply for aid section. And what that does is it tells you exactly where to start to apply for federal aid, exactly where to go after students receive their student aid report outlining what kinds of federal aid that they do qualify for, prioritizes the need to get free student aid, as much free student aid as possible. One place we direct students to on the Applied for Aid section is the College Foundation of West Virginia. The College Foundation of West Virginia has on its website a comprehensive list, and I want to say a toolbox of every scholarship and grant available to a West Virginia student. Now, these wouldn't necessarily be the community-based or say church-based kind of smaller scholarships that you might get, but every scholarship and grant available to a West Virginia student is basically housed, it can be found right there on the College Foundation of West Virginia. And the College Foundation of West Virginia website also can direct students to help them compare schools, and it gives its own list of things that students and parents can do even as the child navigates high school from 10th grade, perhaps even earlier, things that student can do to prepare.
We're talking about student loans. My guest is Senior Assistant West Virginia Attorney General Chris Hedges. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. You said something there that piqued my interest, comparing colleges. We're living in a time where there are formal training programs available. Sometimes it seems like on every street corner. There are business schools, and then we have colleges and universities, some of which have business schools in them, but they're different from the other business schools. There are community colleges. There are all sorts of vocational training programs, and somewhat horribly in West Virginia in just the last several months, we had a school go bankrupt, Mountain State University, wasn't it?
That's right.
Just flat went out of business. How should parents, how should the student evaluate the institutions?
Well, one thing that we direct students to do, students and parents, is we focus mainly on the financial aspect, but one thing we do want students and parents to really focus on is what are they going to get for their money. We have a whole section, one of those roadmap stops is compare cost. So there are online calculators that students and parents can use to plug in the numbers that the school offers up on its website. You can compare schools side by side. What am I getting for this amount of money? Exactly what kind of instruction, exactly what kind of degree, exactly what kind of help down the road. And you can't necessarily just take a school's word for it, especially, I'm sorry to say, when it comes to a for-profit school. Congressional studies now have shown a remarkable pattern of private school, of for-profit trade schools for associate degrees. The investment that students are making in those schools often are not coming to fruition. Approximately 60% of students going into two-year degree programs for for-profit schools in the United States are not finishing that degree. They're not finishing that two-year program. And 96% of those students have taken out federal student loans. And these are thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. And what these students don't know is that many times they can get an equal associate degree or one of equal quality, perhaps better, at a local community college that costs them nearly nothing, or at least costs them significantly less by a fraction of the cost of what one of these for-profit schools. And so what people need to remember is that any kind of for-profit school, especially for associate's degrees, people need to remember to ask lots of questions and not necessarily believe everything that somebody is telling them by word of mouth in terms of the jobs programs and the jobs promises that they're going to get once they graduate. I always ask to see anything like that in writing. Make sure that it's something that you can save, you can take home, and if those representations, it's like buying a car sometimes. If those representations turn out not to be true, that is your link to maybe do something about it after the fact.
Interestingly, it's not just for-profit schools that will inflate employment figures and opportunity figures. I've seen state universities who inflate their figures of successful employment rates because there are rating services out there that will tell you about the 100 top universities in the country or something like that, and part of their ratings is employment. Mm-hmm. So somebody will go through a program, maybe go through an accounting program, and if somebody, Uncle Ernie, comes by and says, help me with my taxes, and then they get an inquiry from the school, says, are you employed? Nobody wants to say I'm unemployed. They want to say I'm making good, so they'll report back, yes, I'm doing tax preparation,
right.
And all of a sudden that person is employed. So those figures are kind of self-inflating, and then the colleges, the universities will pump them up too. I would talk to other students who have been there and have come out and ask, what kind of help did you get from the placement service?
Definitely. definitely. And you know, you would want to ask about accreditation. A lot of places, a lot of for-profit schools, even the ones that are I mean, every school is going to talk about accreditation, just about. You want to go to a school that has a good accreditation, and that's the magic word. What you can't do is take a for-profit school's word for it. You're not only going to want to research whether that school is in fact accredited, but you're going to want to do your research on the accreditation body that gave that school that approval. Do the research on whether that accreditation body has the credentials and isn't sort of a fly-by-night type of a program. See whether there are complaints out there against that accreditation body. See what other schools are approved by that accreditation body. If you don't have other prestigious schools that are obviously, you know, giving a high-quality product being approved by that accreditation body, then really how much is that designation worth?
Let's talk a little bit about the nature of some of these schools. You've referred several times to for-profit schools. So I should look for a nonprofit school?
Well, in my opinion, and what you need to focus on are either public universities or private universities. I mean, private schools often are nonprofit. In fact, I believe Mountain State University was a nonprofit. But nonprofit does not mean public. Nonprofit doesn't mean good or bad.
It doesn't mean charitable either.
That's right. That's right. What we really want to steer people away from are any kind of private school that makes lots of representations about the ability, about job placement afterward that may not actually come to fruition. There are a lot of schools out there that are nonprofit, but they certainly act like a very profit-driven enterprise, and they focus a whole lot of their resources and a whole lot of your tuition dollars on their own bottom lines, on their CEO's pay, on recruiting other people. So again, your tuition dollars are spent in vast numbers on recruiting other students instead of on your personal instruction. These are good questions to ask any institution that you're applying for. So we don't want to steer people away from an education. We don't want to steer people away from, we're certainly not steering people away from private colleges. We are, however, asking consumers to ask a lot of questions, and especially ask questions if you're thinking about going to for-profit schools, trade schools, especially on the two-year degree. If you want to get a two-year degree, certainly have a hard look at going to community college.
We're talking about student loans. My guest is Senior Assistant West Virginia Attorney General Chris Hedges. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. I suppose the moral of this story is, although there are lots of search engines, the phrase is, Google is your friend. Mm-hmm. If you have access to the internet, and if you're planning to go to college, you best get access to the internet. Search, read, study up. If you're trying to compare colleges or educational institutions of any kind, find similar institutions and then look at them side by side. Print out the pages. We're talking about accrediting agencies. Let's see who these people are accredited by. If all similar schools are accredited by the same agency, that's basically a good sign. Mm-hmm. But then check out that agency too. Check out student-teacher ratios, mm-hmm. Things of that sort. I guess you almost have to get a degree to go get a degree. It is not easy to learn about these things, that's right, but it's in your best interest to do it. I suppose somebody could say, well, I live in Huntington, so I'm going to go to Marshall. Mm-hmm. That's probably a pretty safe bet. Right. Or I live in Morgantown, I'm going to WVU. That's probably a pretty safe bet. Mm-hmm. But when you get a field of that, or you're wanting to go learn to be an aviation mechanic or a diesel mechanic, check out the schools. Mm-hmm. This is really directed towards student loans. So I take out $30,000 or $40,000 worth of student loans. I get a bachelor's degree, I'm ready to go out and get a job, and all of a sudden I find out I can't pay that back. They want $800 or $900 a month, mm-hmm. and I'm only making $1,200 a month. What can a student do in circumstances like that?
Well, two sections of our roadmap on our website focus on that very problem. Perhaps the most appropriate to discuss first is the section on paying it back. We discuss in that final section, that final stop, exactly what kinds of options might be available to you if you have in fact taken out federal direct loans, subsidized and unsubsidized. Federal direct loans are the best loan package out there for students today, for college students today. And hopefully, if you've taken out that kind, you have a lot of options. You can defer payment if you're under particularly difficult financial, a particularly difficult financial situation at the time. You can defer. They have deferment programs under the federal government where you can wait and pay. You can delay paying until later. They have income-based repayment programs where instead of asking you for $900 per month, they're going to ask you for only a percentage of your income per month. And those kinds of consumer protections are why we are directing students to those to maximize their ability to take out those federal direct loans first. Now that takes us back to the other stop on the roadmap: apply for aid. In that section is perhaps the most important thing that we're trying to direct students to do, is first maximize as much as possible the free aid that you get. There are all those resources for scholarships and grants. Take the time to write your own form letters to organizations and ask for those scholarships and grants. And the more of that free money that rolls in, you can scale back on the amount of debt that you're taking out. Scale back on the amount of student debt that you've applied for and have been approved for. Once all that happens, if you have to take out those, if you have to take out loans from private lenders to fill the gaps, that's fine. A lot of us have had to take out private loans as we enter the college scenario. But if you can avoid it at all possible, we do recommend that you avoid private loans because they simply do not have those repayment protections. Some of them have some repayment protections, but they're never going to be as solid of a consumer protection as you get with federal direct loans. So in terms of paying it back, yeah, if you do graduate with a lot of student debt and a lot of that debt is from private lenders, you're going to have some trouble paying that back.
Well, I'm not concerned. I may have tens of thousands of dollars of student debt, but if I can't get a job, I'll just file bankruptcy.
Right. That's not necessarily a panacea for many reasons. But that is the trade-off that with the like I said, the best the best loan packages are available through federal direct loans. The trade-off of that is that federal direct loans are not dischargeable in bankruptcy. You do have more of those options when you've taken out loans from private lenders, but that unfortunately is the trade-off. Those aren't available for discharge in bankruptcy.
And you're more likely to have to pay higher interest rates on private loans than on the federal loans.
More likely, that's right. The caps on private loans, private student loans are really high in comparison to federal direct loans. I want to say that the cap on interest rates for federal direct loans right now is 6 to 7%.
It sounds like you have to study up on what college you want to go to, try to figure out what the return is on your dollar invested in the education to make sure that it's worth what you're paying for it. And then if you want to get loans, you actually have to read those loan agreements.
Right. Especially if you're taking out private loans. That's what I want to stress. And really, the main thing to take away from this program today is that if all of this sounds like way too much to even process, we want to direct your attention to projectstudentaid.com, because the whole idea there is to simplify this process. Take it down from being a haystack and putting it into a toolbox. You follow the roadmap, and it's easy to follow. It's the best tool we think that any student or parent should ever try to use to apply for student aid and save money while applying for college.
You are your own best guidance counselor. Talk to the people who are there to help you, like your guidance counselor. Go to the Attorney General's webpage, projectstudentaid.com. It's all one word, projectstudentaid.com, and read. If you want to get a higher education experience, you're going to have to educate yourself along the way. Chris, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you also for joining us. On behalf of the LawWorks, I'm Dan Ringer. Good evening.
If you would like to suggest a topic for a future The LawWorks show, or if you're a school teacher and would like to receive a DVD of this show for classroom use, send us an email to thelawworks@comcast.net or visit us on Facebook. On the LawWorks website at thelawworks.org, you'll find a listing of recent The LawWorks programs, additional information about this show's topic, and video of this and recent shows. You can also find the LawWorks programs on YouTube and iTunes.
The LawWorks is produced in cooperation with the Office of the West Virginia Attorney General, the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the Mountain State Bar, the Monongalia County Bar Association, and the West Virginia University College of Law. The LawWorks is made possible by major grants from the Office of the West Virginia Attorney General and from Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975 which provides high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems as well as PC-based systems, and by a grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation. The West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and justice system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia.